Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. This is Jock here. This is Optimizing Human Potential. It's been a very long time since I've been on this, or any of our other hosts have been doing this. And it's always been something that we really focus in the Holistic Network to try and get more episodes out there, more in-depth discussions, not only to support our members, but to bring really interesting facts in. Of course, we're moving into 2025. Everything is changing in the world. There's so much insecurity. There's so much uncertainty. But imagine if you woke up in the morning and you realized through your genealogy, or maybe the history that you had been researching, that you were part of an amazing historical legend. Imagine that you were a warrior of sorts, a spiritual warrior of sorts, and that you had been downtrodden for many, many years. Imagine then if you looked into your history and you found out that other organizations or other countries or other political lands, political leaders wanted to destroy your history. Imagine how that would feel to you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm bringing a guest to me today that I've met recently that is absolutely phenomenal and has exactly one of those stories. That this is the first episode that we've come back with, Optimizing Human Potential, and this is all about human potential, and the story, the history, the warriorship connected to this is absolutely phenomenal. Please welcome my guest, Suhein Beck. Am I actually saying this? I've called you Suhein and Suhein and God knows what else.
Yes, Jock, it's fine. Suhein. It's like Sue-Ann with an H in the middle. Suhein.
Suhein. Right, I've got to remember that. This is my Scottish accent. Suhein, welcome to Optimizing Human Potential. Now, you and I have had a good conversation before, but what I just kind of introduced you is really true, that your lineage is not only a massive spiritual foundation, but that story of trying to wipe out your lineage is true. So let's tell people a little bit about you, and I'm not going to mention who you are because it's your story. You tell me all about your legend.
Okay. Well, Jock, I'm truly honored to be here. For the audience, this is my first podcast coming out publicly to the world. And this is demarcating my speaking campaign, which I hope to launch, as well as my books. So Jock, you literally are my first stepping stone out into the world, and I so appreciate you. So I chose carefully, and I think destiny chose us for this together. So I trust you to help me disseminate the truth. And so
Honored.
Thank you. And I have an entire box of brand new tissues. So
and for those of you that maybe
you had me rolling.
For those of you that don't understand this, when Suhein and I actually met and we chatted just not so long ago, it got very emotional, and she was going through those and bringing those emotions out. And you'll understand why when Suhein tells you the story of her lineage, which is absolutely fascinating. So Suhein, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you came from.
Okay, so how about I twist it around a little bit and twist it around to the audience? And if the audience could ask themselves, have they ever checked off the box Caucasian in any kind of a government, employment, application? Do they identify themselves as Caucasian? And if they do, then we're cousins, but not in the way you think. Because if you check off that box, you are actually appropriating my culture in a very wrong way. So the word Caucasian technically does not mean white. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is
shock horror.
It really is a shocking thing, because here in the States, the word Caucasian is basically a standardized race connotation. So if you check off that box anywhere and say you are Caucasian, may I clarify to you now and set the record straight that what it means is that you are specifically from a very small region in the Caucasus Mountains of South Russia, just north of Turkey. The Black Sea is on our west. Greece is just further to the west. That mountain ridge between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea is exactly where the Caucasus Mountains ridges are. Now, the north is where my people come from, the Caucasians. The south is where the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis ended up. Okay? So now that you have a geographical picture of where it's at, the Caucasus Mountains are spectacular. One, because they were our only friends in defending against the Russian Empire. Originally, it was from Genghis Khan, who was trying to move into the West, and we warded Genghis Khan off of the West for at least 4 or 5 invasions. And then when the Russian Empire came to be, we fought the Russian Empire for 101 years, from 1763 to May 21st, 1864. There was a brutal 100-year war that included the first and the largest genocide on European soil that is unbeknownst to the world, prior to the Holocaust. So we were the first and largest genocide on European soil prior to the Holocaust in modern times. So we had over 1 million of our ancestors killed off. That is 90% of our population. On May 21st, 1864, that was the final decree that put us into an exile until today. Only 500,000 Circassians, Caucasians, remained in the Caucasus. Later, in the 1940s, Stalin came along. You know, of course, it was 1864, and then it was the 1917 Communist Revolution, which in of itself was what it was, okay? And then Stalin came along, and he's like, hey, let me just finish them off. So that was a secondary genocide where he just, one morning, village after village after village was loaded onto trucks in chains into Siberia and Kazakhstan. We are mountain people. So for us to lose our mountains, this was biologically against our DNA. The ones that were exiled in 1864, we were put onto boats that were purposely meant to be sabotaged to sink in the Black Sea. Hundreds of thousands of bodies were sunk into the Black Sea. Until today, no Circassian eats fish from the Black Sea. How could we possibly eat the flesh of our ancestors? So now, fast forward, the few that left, the few 100,000 that left, we have maintained our heritage, our language, our arts, our music, our dances, and through what's called Adiga Khabza, which is our framework of our culture, we have been able to maintain our culture despite all odds. So we were able to disperse into Europe, the Balkans, Bulgaria, and Europe, as well as the Middle East. The Caucasians, Circassians, were a minority fragment that took on Judaism, took on Christianity. Originally, we were pagans, of course, you know, before monotheism came in.
Yeah.
But they took on the Judaism, took on the Christianity, and took on Islam. So there are variations of Circassians of all denominations. Okay, the majority are Sunni Muslim, as myself. Tomorrow we start Ramadan, by the way.
I know.
So I'm glad we're doing this
I remember
today.
that from my bodyguard days.
Yes. So the majority of the Muslims went to Turkey because Turkey was a Muslim country. And at the turn of the century, between that 1764 to the turn of the century, 1864 till the turn of the century of the 1900s, that was when Turkey was the old sick man. Remember, that was the tail end of the Ottoman Empire where they were really losing and they needed manpower. Well, who best to hire than warriors? And that's all that we have been for thousands of years. So to give you a perspective, we are the indigenous people that inhabited the Caucasus Mountains for over 6, 7, and now 8,000 years, has been proven archaeologically.
And that's
So
something, Suhein, that you have you've been fighting again, fighting for a long time, and you've only just recently, through your research, managed to get that academic, that proven fact. And I find it fascinating that you guys are a warrior, and we'll probably jump onto this now, but this whole idea of Amazonian warriors, princesses, female warriors, that's what you guys essentially were, a very spiritual nation, a very holistic type indigenous culture,
Yes.
with a
Our
phenomenal
origin was nature.
absolutely, with a phenomenal grounding and a phenomenal warriorship history
Yes.
right in the bag. I find it
We
fascinating.
built nothing. We didn't have architecture. We were
No.
all hands on deck. We were fighting for thousands of years. Prior to the Russians, it was the Greeks and the Spartans. And that's where the concept and the mythology of the Amazons versus the
Yeah.
Spartans came along. And so I have to dive into the most fascinating story. And this was what opened Pandora's box.
Yeah.
So there is an anthropologist, Dr. Adrienne Mayer from Stanford University. She happened to be at the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art. And there was this vase. It's called the Goose vase. And for 2,500 years, no one has been able to figure out what, where, or the interpretation of this particular goose vase. And it fascinated all the historians and the art historians for 2,500 years. So Dr. Adrienne Mayer just happened one day and said, you know what? There is a Harvard linguist who knows 17 languages from that area. Why don't we pick up the phone and call him? So she called Dr. John Colarusso, who is fluent in 17 languages. And she said, Dr. Colarusso, we have this vase. It's called the Goose vase. We just wanted to run it by you and see if you recognize the hieroglyphics or whatever this is. So she did not send him an image of the vase, only the letters.
Wow.
The actual inscription. Because, of course, she didn't want to hint the visual cue of what was on the vase. So he said, yeah, send it over. Within seconds, literally on the phone, as he received it, he's like, oh, yeah, that's Circassian.
Wow.
Like, even as I say it, I get goosebumps.
I know. Because I can imagine, though, because of that, just even having that information, because your history has been deliberately
erased.
tried to be subdued and destroyed over the years, but to have that just surface recently and have that confirmation, it must have been mind-blowing.
Validating on another level. It was extraordinary. So, and all these things happened all at the same time. So, and I'll share another verticality with you as well. So in that moment that Dr. John Colarusso interpreted the vase, and the vase said something absurd like, the old man stole the belt or the dog from the woman with the golden belt or something like that. And part of our culture, us women, we all have our golden belts. We all have our metal belts. We have this
And
heritage.
I'll just interject there, ladies and gentlemen. You can go on and go into Suhein's website, which is suheinbeck.com.
Suhein.com.
And there's pictures there where you can see the traditional dress that she's speaking about.
Yes. And I'll include more pictures on that because it is such an important factor.
Yeah.
So that was the turning point that the language of Circassian came to be in the art history world. And then everyone was fascinated. And now it is on the United Nations list of endangered species languages that they must resuscitate, because now they're discovering that it is the proto-Indo-European language. And now they are discovering all of this. But wait, there's more. My grandfather, who was a surgeon, but he was a multi-science academic, had originally created the first dictionary between Latin, Turkish, Arabic, and Circassian.
Oh.
So he was a polyglot, and he was one of the first ones because he was part of the Exile. He was actually one of the ones that were transferred out from the 1860s out. So he wanted to maintain the languages, and he happened to land in Greece, studied medicine in Greece and in Turkey, and then ended up in Syria, in the Golan Heights. So, you know, he was incredible from the standpoint that he maintained the mastery of the languages, wanted to create the first dictionary, and his theory was that Circassian was the proto-Indo-European language, and because of its complexity, everyone discarded it, and it is considered one of the most complex languages on planet Earth.
That's crazy. I mean, that's probably close to Latin, like, because Latin is one of the most complicated languages.
It's more complex.
And that's, I mean, to have it at that level as well. Now, did that language then evolve into other languages that we recognize in the modern day?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So it was a platform originally,
Right.
and then the diversions went in so many different directions. So that was one verticality between Dr. Adrian Mayer and Dr. John Colarusso. Meanwhile, Dr. Janine Kimball was an archaeologist from the United States who, after the communist revolution of glasnost and perestroika in the 1980s, with Gorbachev, allowed for scientists to start sharing information. Because of the DNA science, Dr. Janine Kimball was allowed in to Russian territories and was able to uncover 1,000 grave sites in those Euro-Asian steppes. And because of the cold, because of the snow, the ice, and whatnot,
It was preserved.
in the mountains and the elevations, a lot of preservation was there. A lot of graves had been robbed because, back then you would be buried with your jewels, with your, whatever. So what Dr. Janine Kimball found was women warriors that were dated back 5, 6, 7, 8,000 years back. Those women warriors were buried with their horses, which is our tradition because when you die, your horse, your companion, which we call brother, because our horse is our brother. We are an equestrian nation. Our dances, our culture, our art, everything, our prancing mirrors the moves of the horses. So when women were buried, and men, but when the women were buried with their horses, they were buried in the position as if riding them so that they go into heaven, glorified as the warrior princess they were, with her
that's
weapons.
phenomenal.
The other phantasmical thing is that she was able to see wounds, blunt wounds on the skull and different areas of the body that were clearly weapon wounds that were not the cause of death. So that means these women were professional warriors. They would go out to the battlefield, get wounded, come back, go out again.
So this is fascinating. This is, Suhein, because this is, and people might not think of this because and it's a very feminist direction that I'm moving on here, because when we think about warriors, essentially, albeit be the ego of man and nature, we immediately think of warriors as men. We think of warriors as ancient knights, samurai. We think of them and having this kind of spiritual foundation. And we have this idea of Amazonian warriors. It's something that's mythological. But to have this now, here's my question. How did the women become the warriors and not the Circassian men?
They were. So our warrior men are called narts.
Right.
N-A-R-T. In fact, they were so glorified. They were so magnified. We have what's called Nart sagas. N-A-R-T-S-A-G-A-S. Those Nart sagas are what later came to be compiled into the Arthurian legends of the Sword in the Stone and the Camelot Code of Honors and whatnot. So this was the effect of Western Europe being affected by the Narts. The Narts were hired guns, so to speak.
Like
by the way, the Bronze Age started in the Caucasus Mountains as well because of the high compilation of minerals. That was the reason that they were able to create such incredible weaponry. And what do you call the the mail net that the soldiers would have it's a shield made chain
You
mail.
mean the chain mail for
Yes.
the knights and things? They would have chain mail, and samurai
That
in their
also,
yoroi they would
yeah,
have.
that was also started in the Caucasus as well. So a
Wow.
lot of the weapon sciences are now showing clarity as to their origins because of the tools that were made in them. The domestication of horses has now been proven to be in that same area because of the bits that change the teeth structure of horses from one generation to another in that location, in that region.
Wow.
So the bits that were created for the horses and the domestication of those, which again, it's part of our culture and the horse whispering and whatnot. So back to the Greeks, just on this one note of the Amazons, because it's such a, sexual fantasy of Hollywood and the Greek mythologies.
Absolutely,
and whatnot.
yeah.
So why were the women glorified and the men not? First of all, again, it's been all hands on deck. So there were periods of time where the population of men decreased. So of course, we women had to, take up the slack and do whatever was necessary. Secondarily, we were fighting together. And we had equal say. We had a place at the round table. And that round table was a fire pit where we would strategize war processes and strategies and, protocols. The Greeks, when they came up on the Black Sea ports and saw this, and if you can close your eyes for a second, and I want you to think of yourself as a Greek that has not seen women ever fighting. Women were second and third class citizens and not even considered citizens at that time. So imagine all of a sudden you come across these forested mountains, because on the Black Sea along Abkhazia, Sukhumi, that ridge is very high, like a fortress, and dense forests. So all of a sudden, within the shadows of the trees, what are you seeing? You are seeing women on horses with men on horses. You think they're huge. You think they're large.
Right.
Because the great equalizer in physical body strength is the horse. If you take a 3-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy and teach them archery on a horse, their physical strength is the same. But in the Greeks' shock of what they were seeing, they couldn't fathom that, like, what are these women? They're huge. We were not huge. The archaeological evidence of the bone structures proves we were not larger than life, but there are different factors that they saw it as that.
They had the illusion of it. It reminds me of the ancient ninja in Japan. They were known as the Shadow Warriors, and the reason they were known as the Shadow Warriors is people were terrified of them. Samurai were wary of them in different clans. Right. Because the moonlight, the reason they were Shadow Warriors, the moonlight behind them, they were on each other's shoulders, they had their cloaks on, they looked bigger and they looked more menacing, and so it gave them this illusion.
Exactly. We had coned hats.
Yeah, okay, all right.
We had high heels, believe it or not. Even in our dances, we have the high heels. We always dance on our tippy toes.
Wow.
The sleeves on our coats, our dresses, our ethnic clothing are huge and exaggerated. We did it as wings of eagles. The men did it as part of their martial arts, enlargement.
Yeah.
Our coats had extended exaggerations as well. So the combination of that, and you also hit on the other aspect of the moon. Now let me explain where the word Amazon comes from. Until today, Circassian girls, the most common name is Maza. Si Maza means my Maza. Maza means moon.
Okay.
Generally speaking, the men would idol worship the sun. The women connected more to the 28-day cycle of the moon.
All right, that makes sense, because
and felt
that
an
was
affinity towards the moon and the gravitational force and the attraction of the moon and whatnot. And so there was that, hey, you do you and we do me, there was that comfort. There was cross-sectionality in the pagan worship. Yeah. However, women typically associated themselves more with the softness of the moon, and the men the fierceness of the sun. So Maza means moon. So when the women were in the forest calling to each other, Maza, si Maza, the Greeks heard that and they called that the Lady of the Forest. So that's where the word Amazon
Came
comes
from.
from. And it was our word for, till today, I have 3 cousins named Maza. One C Maza, who's passed away, but 3 Mazas. So, and all these years, everyone was trying to figure out, where did the word Amazon come from? And it meant, one-breasted woman because they were doing the archery. No, you don't need to chop off a breast in order for you to arch. It doesn't sit on your chest,
Right, that's
So,
true, actually, yeah.
but that was part of the counter propaganda back to Greece. Because when the Greeks came and saw this equity, equilibrium between men and women, because we earned our rights, we earned our seat at the round table, or so to speak, around the fireplace or around the war councils. When they saw that, they did not want their Greek women in Athens to be affected by that. So of course, they named us the savages that wore pants. By the way,
Wow.
You're welcome. With domestication of horses, we were the first ones with pants because of chafing. We are a
Right,
free nation,
obviously, yes.
So when the Greeks and the Celtic nations and the Middle East and all the way to Jesus and all the way
Yeah.
to Muhammad, they were still wearing thobes, kilts, togas. We were wearing pants, and the Greeks specifically named us those that wore pants,
That's crazy.
implying the savages.
Right, yeah.
Hell yeah, we're savages.
Yeah. Well, warrior nation.
Yeah. And the word berserk is one of the original Circassian words. And it was because we have this rage personification of passion, impassioned war, holistic level, like berserk, when you go berserk.
Yeah.
So I understand that because that's very much in my DNA. And any person you can ask them, does Suhein go berserk? And I have the capacity, and every Circassian that I've known has
They're the
this
same.
temperament
Right.
of extreme passion, and so of course we've had to moderate that and become civilized. And so we were savages to some degree because we had that capacity, but we were always a defending nation. We were never an offensive nation.
But we talked before, because you have over 100 years of fighting various nations, especially Russia. But one of the things that we discussed as well is that these other nations were trying to destroy your history.
Till today.
What made you pick up this fight to be recognized? Because you're making massive strides out there. There's a tremendous amount of indigenous history, shamanistic history, spiritual history, that if you hadn't have done it, it may have possibly even have disappeared. Because it's very small.
I'm lucky because there have been academics like Dr. John Colarusso, who's basically spent his life in the Caucasus learning these languages. Other academic scholars, Dr. Lars Funch Hansen in the Netherlands. Yeah. There's a bunch of academics that have spent their entire lives studying, extracting data, publishing academic papers that no one is reading.
That's the thing. What's making you, because now you're I see you as the person that's now the modern female warrior that's coming out and trying to keep your history alive and remembered, because you were a downtrodden nation. They were trying to destroy you. Why have you taken up this fight?
I can't not take it.
That's a good enough answer.
I can't not. And I have a gazillion things like my business, and I have other things to distract me that are legitimate for my livelihood and whatnot, but I don't have a choice. I have to do this. I am 100% Circassian. You know, my grandfather comes from nobility. I've suffered from being invisible for so long. Like as a child growing up in New Jersey, I would watch police shows and, they would, 10 Roger, 10-4 Roger, Caucasian male found, burglar, da 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 da. I was mortified, thinking my people are all criminals.
Yeah, that must be quite traumatic to connect yourself with that.
Yeah, so it was kind of a, looking for a needle in a haystack. And back then, like I would search encyclopedias, and the only thing that they would say is, it was a nation of brave, courageous warrior men and beautiful Euro-Asian women. And that was it, and it's like, okay, yeah, the Euro-Asian women were, kidnapped and taken into the sex slave trade of the harems and, whatnot throughout the Middle East, which now, just in the last year, the Italian government archives have released that Leonardo da Vinci's mother was a slave that was kidnapped. She was also a nobility princess.
And you told me about this, and she was Circassian.
Yes. And now this has been
crazy,
proven.
that is.
And Leonardo da Vinci's father could not marry her because she had previously been a slave, but she was beautiful, she was, intelligent, and she had incredible skills. So the Silk route ended in the Caucasus because of the mountains.
Yeah.
However, because the Circassians were so incredible with their manipulation of fabrics and brocades, that our costumes, our daily wear, were so extravagant that the Italians were so impressed with it, they forced the Silk Route to continue north and then west into Italy. And that is where there is a river called Adiga River in Venetia. And that is where so many Circassians landed that they took in order for them to start the fabric and materials and the brocades of the Renaissance period. So that is something. And so I think that was where, that all happened. But anyway, so Leonardo da Vinci's mother, Leonardo's my cousin.
That's crazy. I find it fascinating though. I find it fascinating though, talking to you and finding out that even a lot of our traditions, or a lot of what we think we understand, there is actually a root in the Circassian history.
Yogurt?
And honestly, I find it absolutely fascinating. Tell us a little bit about maybe some of the traditions of the women warriors in your history. So the spiritual traditions and even just general traditions that they would follow.
Okay, so this is very new information, and that is that the belt that Wonder Woman had, the golden belt.
Yeah.
Okay. Hollywood has exploited that, and the concept of all of that. Well, Wonder Woman that series was based on the concept of the Amazons in the Caucasus.
Yeah.
Okay, in the Black Sea, and the Greeks and the Spartans that tried to conquer them, yada yada. Well, the concept of the belt was that these Amazons would wear these belts kind of like soldier dog tags.
Oh, wow.
So that belt, like all of our costumes, have the inscription of our family name. So our legion, our name, our emblem, we are supposed to know our ancestors 7 layers back. That's part of our framework. But unfortunately, because of the exile, we got cut off and all communication was disallowed. We were not allowed to contact our ancestors that were remaining in the Caucasus. So from 1864 up until the Glasnost Perestroika, 1988 communism fall, we were cut off from our ancestors. So there was no communication. Secret letters would go back and forth.
Yeah.
But rarely and very risky. So going back to the Golden Belt, when the Greek Spartan heroes were trying to conquer the women and show that they got the trophy, their trophy was the belt.
It was the belt.
So think about that. what does that belt signify? That belt signifies the superpower of Wonder
Yeah,
Woman. She
absolutely.
was
It's
not
like
nothing
it's like
without
the
her
kryptonite,
belt.
isn't it? It's like Superman's kryptonite.
Yes, but what is the belt? It's her identity.
Yeah.
So her superpower is her identity. And for us, our identity was stolen. It was raped. It was taken away and erased. And we had to fight for it so diligently.
Right.
Till today, we, we are about 6 to 8 million remaining all over the world. The majority
That
in
might sound a lot, but it's not. It's actually minuscule compared to other nations.
right. And we argue amongst ourselves in, the not diluting our culture. And so to maintain, and so, that's the other thing, is that we really are a nation that has tried to hold on to our Adiga Khabza, which is our framework. And that framework is based on one word. And that's what I talk about everywhere. And that is the code of honor. So
Which
everything,
is really that I love that. I love that analogy because that's like the knights, the ancient knights and the knights, Knights Templar or just Knights of the Round Table. They have a code of honor. We have the Knights Code.
yeah. And that was based on the Nart sagas.
It's nice.
And that was another scholar here in Los Angeles that has proven that. And
Yeah.
that's the one that I told you, that she had a publishing contract with Princeton Press. And when it was proven that it was from the Caucasus and not originally from the Celtic, origin, he was so insulted. And it was like, again, we are not taking away, we are adding to the depth of our histories. So,
What is it that you hope, Suhein, what is it you hope to achieve before we kind of come to just the end of this? We'll need to do a part 2 on this because there's so much to unpack. And ladies and gentlemen, Suhein is a part of our holistic network, and you'll be able to go in and take one of our masterclasses and learn about this history and traditions. But what is it that you hope to achieve from what you're doing now? What is the end goal? What is the end result for you?
so if I may divide that into two,
Yeah.
okay? So for my people, I want to set the record straight. And I want history to have the finality of the truth being told once and for all. That we're an honorable, courageous nation, and we had a lot to offer, and we still have a lot to offer. On an
So
individual,
let's break that down a little bit because that's interesting because we're talking about human potential here, and you're almost a nation that was forgotten. What is it that you have to offer? What is it that the Circassian nation has to offer humanity?
that's where I'm reverting the second part of that answer
All right.
to your audience.
Yeah.
And that is to reintroduce the concept of code of honor individually to each person.
Beautiful.
Because speaking of America, it is a very individualistic society. So it doesn't have that collectivism, shame, concept. And so the concept of honor doesn't exist. What exists here is a CYA, cover your ass.
Couldn't have put that better myself.
It is a capitalistic exploitation of barely meet the bare minimum of product safety standards or, whatnot. It doesn't have that concept of, I am building something of a legacy far and above my lifetime.
Right. Yeah.
And so what I propose to the audience, the takeaway from Suhein, from the Circassians, is this concept of elevate your code of honor, elevate your own sense of dignity, so that wherever you work, whatever you associate with, people think of you as a person of honor, which is lost in the vernacular.
It is actually, yeah.
The only times we in America speak of honor is if you are speaking of the Marines, because they have that as part of their mantra, or if you made honor roll at school. Those are the only two in contexts that word is presented. And so my proposal to humanity on behalf of my people is that we had a very strict code of honor. And, that's what the Arthurian legends took, let's reintroduce that back into humanity so that we can take away the exploitations of capitalism. And I'm an entrepreneur, don't get me wrong, but I am an entrepreneur that sleeps with a conscience. I don't meet product safety standards. I far and above exceed them.
Yeah.
That's the difference that I'm talking about. I have my own code of honor that no regulation can come close to my level of standard.
I love that. I think that's a good thing to tidy up, because I think now is, we don't have a massive amount of time today, but we have to come back. I would like to come back and do a part 2 on this. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can join us again. We're probably going to record this again next week, because I want to do a part 2, and we're going to go into the code of honor of the Circassian. And please come and join Suhein in the Holistic Network. Come in and take that masterclass that she's going to be doing. Learn more. Because optimizing, human potential is not just about a service that you give. Human potential is about the fire that's inside of you, that divine spark that's there that makes you want to be greater than you can ever imagine and serve humanity in a most profound way. And I think this is phenomenal what you're doing, Suhein. And I would join us again, because there is 100% part 2 of this, where we're going to go deeper into the code of honor of the Circassian people. And I'm throwing you under the bus here, Suhein, but you'll come back and you'll do that part 2, won't you?
I would be honored.
That would be phenomenal. So, Suhein, what is it that you would like to leave, just as a final thought before we finish off this part 1? What kind of final thought would you like people to take away from this discussion here that's leading into our next discussion?
Think forward into the future, and how would people talk about you as their ancestor?
That's brilliant. I love that. Suhein, thank you so much for being with me again on Optimizing Human Potential. You're the first guest that's been back since a very long time, and I'm really excited. Ladies and gentlemen, this, as I said, this is just the first part. The history is fascinating. The code of honor is heartwarming and touching and transformational. And we have to unpack the trauma.
I've been trying to set up my speaking campaign platform, and I have mentors and people, and they're all saying, like, you can't market that. It sounds very like you're the morale police. And I said, look, far be it from me to be the morale police or the fashion police for that, none of the police. I can't. But it's a concept that we have to reintroduce.
And I'm of the opinion, when someone says you can't do that, then I'm probably like yourself. I'm going to say, well, I'm going to prove to you that I can. And I think this is the start of something that is beautiful. I think it's the start of something that will grow. And ladies and gentlemen, if Suhein's a phenomenal speaker. If you are running a women's organization, if you've got a platform out there that needs to hear this, because there's many women out there that do not feel they have a voice and could actually learn from the history of the Circassian women. So contact Suhein. There'll be links in the description where you can connect with her on her website, but also in the Holistic Network as well. Ask her any questions, send them in. This is just a short episode that we have now, just to give you a taste of what's coming, to give you an idea of how this historical transformational concept can actually affect your life in many great ways. Suhein, thank you so much for being my guest today. I'm looking forward to part 2.